preserving our culture, because our culture is not evil. Our culture is beautiful.
The gods were silenced, but were they ever gone? For centuries, their names were buried beneath foreign tongues. Their altars destroyed, their songs forgotten, their images repainted as demons or ghosts. In the shadow of colonization, the gods of Africa, once thunderous, once beloved, were reduced to whispers. Where once they were called upon in birth, in war, in death, they were replaced by foreign saints and imported saviors. And yet today, something stirs, something ancient, something undeniable. Across continents and timelines, people are dreaming again. Dreams of rivers that speak, of thunder that has a name, of ancestors cloaked in fire and wind, whispering in lost dialects. Musicians chant old prayers over modern beats. Painters, sculptors, and even machines, yes, even AI, begin to birth faces that feel familiar but ancient, known yet unspoken. Why? Why are these gods, Orisha, Vodun, Abosom, Loa, emerging in the imagination of a generation raised in the ruins of empire? Why now, when we are more connected, more technological, and more displaced than ever? Is this a cultural revival, a spiritual rebellion? Or is it something deeper? Are the gods who were once silenced returning, not in temples of stone, but in spirit, in code, in consciousness? This is not just a story of the past. This is an investigation into the now, into the rising heartbeat of African spirituality in art, in ritual, in memory, into the unexplainable pull many are feeling toward old names, old rites, old gods. We are not here to convert or convince. We are here to listen to dreams, to visions, to the soft, persistent voice of a spirit that refuses to be forgotten. So we ask the question that echoes louder every day. Are the gods returning? Or did we finally learn how to hear them again? The first step in silencing a god is to rename it, to make it strange on the tongue of its own people, to rewrite the story so that the protector becomes the persecutor, the healer becomes the heretic, and the sacred becomes the savage. This is how the erasure of African deities began, not with fire and chains, but with language. Colonizers didn't simply arrive with armies, they arrived with definitions. Where Africans saw Ogun, god of iron and righteous war, the colonizers saw a demon to be cast out. Where they saw Mami Wata, spirit of water and healing, the missionaries saw temptation and sin. And so the gods were renamed, then condemned, then removed. The church was not only a place of worship, it was a weapon. European missionaries, under banners of salvation, declared war on the spirit. Schools were constructed not to educate, but to reform. Children were forbidden from speaking their mother tongues, let alone invoking their ancestral spirits. Rituals were called witchcraft. Drums were silenced. Sacred dances were banned. The gods of the land were framed as primitive illusions, obstacles to progress, or tools of the devil. These labels, repeated in sermons, books, and classrooms, worked like slow poison. Over time, even those who had once offered sacrifices began to question their own gods. Forced conversions went hand in hand with colonization. In some regions, baptism was required for land, for access to basic services, even for survival. In others, traditional leaders were publicly humiliated, their shrines burned, their sacred symbols mocked or destroyed. Resistance was often met with violence. Entire communities were displaced, and with them, their spiritual traditions. The gods, once central to daily life, were pushed to the margins, hidden behind curtains of fear and shame. But spirit does not die. Even as it was driven underground, African spirituality adapted. In quiet corners of homes, grandmothers whispered the old prayers. In secret groves, ceremonies continued under the cover of night. The gods, renamed and rejected by the colonizer, were still honored by those who remembered. A carved mask tucked away in a drawer. A libation poured without explanation. A dream interpreted not aloud, but with knowing. Cultural survival became an act of sacred rebellion. In the Americas, this resistance took on new forms. Enslaved Africans carried their gods with them across the Atlantic, disguising them beneath the names of Catholic saints. Shango became associated with Saint Barbara, Ogun with Saint George, Mami Wata with the Virgin Mary. Through this spiritual camouflage, the old gods remained alive in new lands. They danced in the beat of the drum, hid in the rituals of Santeria, Candomblé, Vodou, and Hoodoo. Colonizers saw compliance, but what they missed was continuity. The gods never left. They simply learned how to survive behind enemy lines. Yet in Africa itself, the silence deepened. With colonial education came alien cosmologies. Children grew up reciting foreign creeds, memorizing European saints, and fearing the names that once protected their ancestors. Spiritual amnesia set in, reinforced by shame. In many places, to follow the old ways was to be backward, uneducated, evil. The gods became ghosts in their own lands. Still, beneath that silence, something stirred. The gods, banished from the public square, remained in bloodlines, in stories, in the soil. And they waited for the dreamers, for the rebels, for the artists, for the generation that would begin to look back and ask, what did we lose? What did they try to erase? Because the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with echoes, echoes of chants, of visions, of thunder once called by name. And when silence holds the memory of gods, it is never truly silence. It is a pause, a breath, a waiting, and that wait, it seems, is ending. They are appearing again in dreams. In the hours when the mind is most quiet, most open, the gods are speaking. To some, they come as voices in the dark, heavy with a language not fully understood, but deeply felt. To others, they appear as figures robed in fire, cloaked in feathers, riding winds or rising from rivers. These are not isolated events. Across Africa and its diaspora, more and more people are speaking of dreams they cannot explain. And within those dreams are names they never studied, faces they've never seen, but somehow know. Testimonies are emerging from young people raised without traditional rituals, who wake from sleep speaking in old dialects. In Ghana, a woman dreams of a river goddess who tells her to stop ignoring her destiny. In Nigeria, a boy dreams of iron and fire and soon after learns of Ogun. In Brazil, a dancer who never knew his ancestry sees a glowing figure who tells him to return to the drum. These stories, once dismissed as coincidence or imagination, are growing in number and in conviction. Some say it began with a question, a deep yearning to know where they came from, not just in blood, but in spirit. Others say they never asked, but the gods came anyway, calling them, choosing them. It is no longer unusual to hear someone say, "I dreamed of a woman wrapped in water," or "An old man in red told me to look deeper." These dreams are not random. They repeat, they evolve, they instruct, and they linger. The elders are not surprised. For generations, they have spoken of visitations in sleep, of ancestors who send dreams as messages, as warnings, as blessings. But now it is not only the initiated who receive them, it is those who have no shrine, no teacher, no books, only an open spirit, and somehow the message still reaches them. It slips through the cracks of modern life, bypasses the noise of the world, and lands right in the subconscious, where ancient memory lives. But what are these dreams? Are they memories awakening from centuries of silence, or are they prophecies reaching forward from the divine? Is the spirit reminding us of what we forgot, or is it showing us what's to come? Perhaps they are both. Perhaps in the fluid realm of dreams, time folds, and what was once sacred returns not to repeat, but to reawaken. What's clear is this: the gods are no longer waiting for rituals alone. They are moving through the personal, the intimate, the symbolic. In a time when many feel spiritually lost, they are appearing not to frighten, but to guide. Not with dogma, but with recognition. A face that feels like family, a voice that feels like home. The dreams are not just dreams. They are visitations. They are callings. They are a quiet revolution of the soul. And those who receive them often find their lives shifting, their paths changing, their hearts pulling them toward names they never chose, but were chosen by. The gods are returning, and they are beginning with dreams. The silence is breaking, not just in dreams, but in daylight. In cities and villages, on beaches and mountains, in cramped apartments and open fields, the drums are sounding again. Sacred chants once buried by fear now rise from the throats of a new generation. Rituals that were once banned, mocked, or punished are returning with power, precision, and pride. This is not nostalgia, this is revival, a ritual revival sweeping across the continent and the diaspora like wildfire, ignited by the longing of a people who have heard the call and are answering. In Nigeria, the Ifa tradition is experiencing a resurgence. Young people once discouraged from speaking their own languages or embracing their heritage are now kneeling before Ifa priests, offering kola nuts, asking the Orisha to guide their steps. Sacred divination through the opal chain or awaken seeds is no longer whispered. It is live-streamed, studied, honored. Initiations that once had to be hidden are now celebrated. In Benin, Vodun temples are being restored, not just as tourist sites, but as living centers of worship. The gods of the earth, sky, and sea are once again receiving offerings, not in secret, but in ceremony. In Burkina Faso and Ghana, the Dagara people are reclaiming their ancestral practices, led by teachers like Malidoma Patrice Somé, whose writings and teachings helped bridge traditional wisdom with a world hungry for healing. Dagara rituals of grief, fire, and elemental balance are being revived by those who understand that these ceremonies are not superstitions. They are technologies of the spirit, blueprints for living well, for dying well, for remembering who we are. What's most powerful about this revival is who is leading it. The youth. Young men and women in their 20s and 30s, many raised in Christian or secular households, are now studying Ifa, learning incantations in Yoruba, Iwe, Kikongo. They are unlearning shame and relearning truth. Some are walking away from churches not in anger, but in search of spiritual home. Others are blending, keeping their Bible but lighting a candle for Ogun. This is not rebellion, it's reclamation. They gather in person and online, in WhatsApp groups, in Instagram lives, in private forest retreats. They learn from elders, from books, from the spirits themselves. And slowly, new priesthoods are forming, not only passed down by blood, but by spirit. These modern priests and priestesses are tattooed, tech-savvy, bilingual. They move through Lagos and London, Accra and Atlanta, carrying the gods into places they were once forbidden. The ceremonies are growing in both number and boldness. Naming rites, ancestral offerings, spirit marriages, trance dancing, all once labeled as evil, are now being live-streamed, documented, reclaimed. Across Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, and the southern United States, African-rooted religions like Candomblé, Santeria, Vodun, and Hoodoo are no longer practiced in shame. They are preached. Their priests wear white with dignity. Their altars are lit in protest and in praise. Spirit-led communities are blossoming, networks that transcend geography, united by shared belief. These are not cults, they are movements. Movements that say, we are not lost, we were taken, and now we are returning. They blend tradition and innovation, honoring the old ways while making space for new expressions. You might see a priest perform a ritual barefoot on sacred soil, then teach its meaning in a Twitter thread. The spirit adapts, always. This is more than spiritual curiosity. It is cultural fire. It is the realization that beneath every name taken from us was another name, waiting to be spoken again. That every ritual band was a key to something larger. Connection, clarity, power. The revival is not asking for permission. It is happening. And with each drumbeat, each libation, each sacred word uttered into the air, it becomes clearer. The gods are not only returning, they are being welcomed, with reverence, with fire, with dance, with open arms and ancient prayers. The silence is ending, and the rituals are rising. The gods have found new altars, stages, studios, canvases, screens. In the realm of music and art, their presence is no longer subtle, it is thunderous. They are being sung, painted, digitized, and projected into the world with a confidence that once would have been punished. The artists of today are not only creators, they are mediums, and what they are channeling is nothing less than divine. Listen closely to Afrobeat, and you'll hear them. Fela Kuti, long before this modern resurgence, invoked Ogun and Orunmila in his lyrics, lacing political resistance with spiritual power. Today, his spiritual lineage continues through artists like Burna Boy and Fireboy DML, who blend Yoruba cosmology with contemporary beats. The Orisha are not just referenced, they are celebrated. Sango's fire lives in bass lines. Oshun's sensual flow moves in vocal runs. These are not casual nods, they are invocations. Trap music, too, often dismissed for its hedonism, has become a space where African diasporic artists call on ancestral memory. In the lyrics, in the ad-libs, in the rhythm that mimics the pulse of ritual drumming, there is something deeper than hype. There is presence. Spiritual jazz, a genre pioneered by legends like Sun Ra and Pharaoh Sanders, laid the blueprint for how music could become a spiritual portal. Today, artists like Kamasi Washington, Chief Shien Atunde Ajua, and even newcomers fusing lo-fi with ritual percussion are reviving the idea that to make sound is to make sacred space. But the gods are not only being heard, they're being seen. Visual artists are painting the Orisha, Loa, and Abasum with boldness once unthinkable. Galleries are filling with images of black gods in gold, spirits surrounded by flame and water, ancestors walking with halos. Sculptors mold sacred figures with reverence. Photographers stage modern interpretations of rituals, blending fashion and spirituality into one frame. And now something even stranger is happening. Artificial intelligence, once the realm of cold data and code, is becoming a tool for the divine. Through AI art generators, creators are feeding ancient names and sacred symbols into machines and receiving back images that look like visions. Faces emerge that resemble ancestral deities, glowing, otherworldly, regal. AI-generated depictions of Ogun, Yamoja, or Esu circulate on social media like digital prayers, reshaping how the gods appear to a new generation. Some ask, how can something as modern, as mechanical, as artificial as AI echo something as old and sacred as spirit? But perhaps that's the wrong question. The ancestors, after all, were never confined to shrines. They moved with us, through language, through exile, through hidden rites. Is it so strange to believe they would move through algorithms too? If the gods once hid inside Catholic saints to survive, why couldn't they now move through code to be seen again? Artists speak of moments during creation when they feel something come over them, an energy, a presence, a guide. They say the brush paints what they did not plan. The beat drops where something tells them it should. The image appears on the screen and they recognize a face they have never drawn before, but somehow knew. This is not imagination. This is invocation. The art is not just art, it is altar. The music is not just sound, it is ceremony. Every line, every note, every digital rendering is a chance for the gods to return, to be seen, heard, and remembered in a world that once tried to erase them. And through these new mediums, the gods are doing what they have always done, adapting, appearing, reminding. They are showing us that spirit is not bound by tradition. It only needs a willing vessel. And now, more than ever, the artists are listening, and the gods are speaking. Across oceans and generations, the children of Africa began to dream of rivers they had never seen, of drums they had never heard, of names they had never been taught. In the diaspora, where centuries of displacement had severed language, land, and lineage, something extraordinary began to happen. People who had never stepped foot on the continent began to feel the pull of its gods, not through textbooks or DNA tests, but through spirit. In the United States, in the Caribbean, in Brazil, descendants of the enslaved began reporting dreams of cloaked figures offering wisdom, of women with serpents in their hair, of men with eyes of fire. They could not explain it. These dreams came without context, but when they started to search, they found names that matched: Ogun, Oshun, Legba. They found that their dreams were not random, they were memory wrapped in mystery. In Cuba and Puerto Rico, Santeria has long carried the Orisha across generations, blending them with Catholic iconography as a means of survival. But now many are peeling back the layers, reclaiming the gods in their original names and forms. No longer hidden behind saints, the deities are being honored in full. In Brazil, the rhythm of candomblé shakes the air with its bold devotion. The terreiros, sacred spaces, are filled with dance, drums, and possession. Young Brazilians of African descent, once shamed for their spiritual heritage, now embrace it with fire. The gods, called Orixás, descend again, not in silence but in sound. In the American South, hoodoo, rooted in African spirituality and shaped by the brutality of enslavement, has re-emerged as a force of ancestral remembrance. It is not merely folk magic, it is survival craft. It is spirit in motion. It is the whisper of an elder's prayer carried through herbs, oils, candles, and sacred dirt. Practitioners who once hid their altars now share them, teach them, guard them fiercely. What's remarkable is how this awakening often begins without language. It starts as a feeling, a dream, a song that haunts you, a ritual you perform without knowing why, a name you speak that later turns out to be divine. This is spirit travel, movement beyond the bounds of speech and geography. It is the soul remembering what the mind has forgotten. The gods don't need you to be fluent. They only need you to be open. Diaspora is often painted as loss, but it is also bridge, a mystical one. Across time and trauma, spirit found a way, and through that bridge, the gods return, not only to the continent, but to the scattered children of the continent, who are now dreaming, dancing, and praying their way back to a truth too sacred to be erased. What does it mean to say the gods are returning? Is it metaphor, a poetic way to describe cultural revival, or is it something deeper, more literal? In spiritual terms, return has never meant a god walking through a door. It means awakening, reactivation. It means presence, sudden, overwhelming, undeniable. And across this generation, that presence is rising again, not in temples of stone, but in the most unexpected places. In dreams, yes. In rituals, yes. But also in technology, in music, in movement, and in bodies that seem to suddenly remember who they once were. For many spiritual traditions, the return of the gods doesn't mean they were ever truly gone. It means they are choosing to manifest again, to possess, to speak. In West African systems like Ifa, Vodun, and others, gods do not remain in heaven, distant and detached. They enter the body. They ride the faithful like horses. In ceremonies, drumming builds to a crescendo, and then a dancer's posture changes. Eyes roll back. Voice deepens. The community knows a god has arrived, that God has not just returned to the world, it has returned through a person. This idea of possession or spiritual embodiment is not abstract. It is how the divine touches earth, and what we are seeing now in rising numbers is this process beginning outside the confines of ritual. People who've never attended a shrine find themselves in trance. They speak with voices that don't sound like their own. They begin to move differently, see differently, dream differently. For some, it is frightening. For others, it is homecoming. Then there's reincarnation. Some spiritualists say these gods return not just through possession, but through birth. That certain individuals are born with the spark of divine identity, not avatars in the Western mythic sense, but vessels, carriers of ancient fire. This is why some children speak languages they've never learned, why others remember lives they've never lived. It is not fantasy, it is cosmology. In many African traditions, the line between God and ancestor, between divine and human, is thin. Perhaps the gods are not returning from elsewhere, they are awakening within us. And yet, they are also adapting. The digital world, often seen as soulless and synthetic, has strangely become one of their newest temples. Algorithms now suggest sacred texts. AI art generates faces of deities no one taught us to name. Hashtags become incantations. Threads become griot storytelling. Sacred symbols once carved into wood or painted on walls now move in pixels across our screens. Some see this as blasphemy, others see it as evolution. After all, if spirit is eternal, why wouldn't it find new forms? Synchronicities are increasing. A person learns a god's name for the first time, only to see it appear again and again that week. They hear a song with lyrics they don't understand, and later discover it's an invocation. They meet a stranger who tells them the same dream they had. These aren't coincidences, they are breadcrumbs left by the spirit world, guiding people back to the source. When the same symbols, stories, and signs begin appearing across continents, across cultures, across algorithms, something larger is at play. In this sense, the return is not a single moment. It is a convergence of memory and mystery, of the ancient and the futuristic. We are watching a sacred convergence unfold, a moment when the digital, the ancestral, and the divine begin to speak in one language. And that language is awakening people everywhere. This is not about going back in time. The gods are not asking us to return to a past we can't recreate. They are asking us to listen in the present, to adapt as they have, to make space for them not just in temples, but in timelines, in code, in cities. Spirit is showing us it can live in the forest, and in the feed, in the chant, and in the circuit. All it needs is a willing vessel, and that vessel might be you. Some priests and priestesses now live stream their rituals. Some hold digital readings, divining through the screen for seekers in other hemispheres. Spirit-led communities are forming online, united by gods they've never seen but deeply feel. The deities are not weakened by this change. They are amplified. Their names are being spoken by mouths that never learned to pronounce them. Their symbols are being drawn by hands that never held chalk or ash, and still they come. So, are the gods truly returning, or are we finally recognizing the ways they never left? Perhaps it is both. Perhaps their silence was never absence. It was waiting. Waiting for the generation that would stop asking for proof and start listening for presence. Waiting for the moment when we would realize that the divine is not bound by time or tradition or even flesh. The gods are not gone. They are awakening. Not above us, not beyond us, but through us. In every ritual reborn, in every dream that haunts, in every melody that stirs the soul, they are saying, "We are here. We never left. Are you ready to remember?" So now we return to the question, is this an awakening or a remembrance? Are we witnessing the gods step forward for the first time in generations? Or are we simply opening our eyes to a presence that has never left us? Perhaps there is no difference. Perhaps awakening is just remembrance that has finally broken through the noise. Perhaps the gods didn't go silent. We did. And now, in dreams and rituals, in poems and code, in the trembling of our spirits and the rhythm of our drums, we are remembering how to listen again. This is not just about tradition. It's about connection. It's about honoring what was buried, not to live in the past, but to move forward in power. The gods are not here to take us backward. They're here to remind us of what we are made of. Spirit, fire, ancestry, the energy that built kingdoms, that survived ships and chains, that now speaks through song and silence. This is the moment to hear them again, to make room in your life for the sacred, to walk with your head high, not only because of where you're going, but because of who walks beside you, seen and unseen. So I ask you, as this film comes to a close, to become part of this remembering. Speak what you've seen, share what you've felt. In the comments, leave your testimony. Has a god ever visited you in a dream? Have you ever heard a name you didn't know, but felt you'd always carried? Have you felt a shift, a pull, a quiet voice that asked you to pay attention? Name the god who visited you. Honor the spirit that stirred you. Like this video, not for numbers, but as a gesture of reverence. Subscribe, not for updates, but to stay connected to this rising memory. And share this story with someone whose soul is searching, whose spirit is waiting to remember what once was sacred. Because the gods are not coming. They are here, and they are waiting for you to say their names once more.